Babble with Ben.
This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nation. I wish to acknowledge them as traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and Aboriginal elders of other communities who may be participating today. Hello and welcome to The Babble. My name is Ben Charlie Brown. On this week's episode, I've been very lucky to have Anth Agostino, one of the co-founders of Cartel Australia, who run label and artist services right here in Melbourne. We talk about how to bridge hobby and career as a musician. We talk about the pros and cons of touring. We talk about how to develop repeat listenership. And we also talk about how to balance communication and creative skills. This episode was recorded on the 13th of July 2024 in Studio C at Box Hill Institute. I hope you enjoy my interview with Anth Agostino. Welcome to The Babble, Anth Agostino.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Hello, Ben.
Hello, mate. Thanks for making the trek in today. Yeah, good to have you on. We've sort of been in each other's circles for a little while now, right?
We've been floating around. I think the first time that I came across you, my good friend Jenna from Real Songwriters of Melbourne, did her episode, and I listened to that and loved it, and then I didn't realise, but we were like crossing back and forth in DMs every now and then, which was really cool. And then it all came to head at the Mystico show. We were doing merch at the Mystico show, and you were there, and I had left, and you had messaged me, and I was like, "Oh my god, I just left!" And we finally get to meet face to face, which is good.
Absolutely, because I think we'd seen each other's stories and gone, we were there, because I had seen someone who looked familiar at the merch store, but I wasn't sure who it was, and of course that was you.
I was the guy going like that on the couch up the top, having a very, 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 very good time.
Well, we've got a few shout-outs, haven't we? I mean, a big shout-out to Jen, a big shout-out to Mystico, who are due to come on this show. I'm looking forward to that.
Yep.
And I think the first time where we crossed paths in DM was, I think I'd had Satali on the show. And I think you had something to do with Satali at the time too.
Yeah. So we had worked with Satali in an artist development sense. So just did a session with her regarding her developing into sustainability as a producer, as an artist. And then I believe we did a PR campaign for her way back when. And yeah, she's doing great things now. So yeah, it's good to be a really, really small part of her journey as well. So
absolutely. So
cool.
Big shout out to Satali too. So as talking about the journey, right? So you are here representing Cartel Management. Hey.
Yeah. Cartel Australia now.
Cartel Australia.
Yeah. We took the management label out of our name, just taking a little bit of a step away from the management side of things for multiple reasons, but more so for the fact that we just feel like the model of management, particularly for independent and developing acts, doesn't necessarily work anymore, for multiple reasons. But, even just to stick to one financially, it's like, yourself as an artist, you're earning, you're lucky to break even at a gig, let alone make money. You're earning 0.003 cents on Spotify. And when a manager comes into play, they're earning 15 to 25% of an artist's earnings, depending on what the deal is. And so, that's not a very good business plan as an up and coming agency. So we kind of wanted to take a step back from that and be able to, instead of focus on a roster of 3 artists, be able to spread ourselves across, multiple artists in a way where we could actually be able to give some value to them, but also be able to, not be so worried financially about what's going to happen moving forward and stuff like that as well. So,
absolutely, because it's certainly an uncertain economic climate at the moment for musicians, especially. Hey,
it's crazy. It's crazy. I think, and a lot of what we're going to go into today with hobby into profession. It's the cost of living right now. Even what we're seeing with the major festivals at the moment, with Splendour and Groovin being cancelled, and I'm sure more to come. Unfortunately, we've unfortunately been kind of living in a little bit of a false economy when it comes to that stuff. International acts are so expensive. Post-COVID, government pumped a whole bunch of money into creative arts, which is awesome. But now that money's gone, and the international acts still want that money. And so, ticket prices have to rise. Audiences don't necessarily understand why they have to, pay so much more for the same experience. And it all just comes crumbling down. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens over the next kind of 4 to 5 year period in terms of events specifically, but for development overall, particularly for artists at an independent level, on the live side, trying to develop into touring. it's going to be really interesting.
So whereabouts in the career of an artist would you sort of be involved, and what services would you involve for that artist?
Yeah, so I guess I'll give you the whole spiel. We're going to be here forever. I'm so sorry. So Cartel, essentially, we started in 2015, so it's our 10th year next year, which is...
Congrats.
Yeah, it's awesome. We're actually just talking on the way here about having a 10-year party, which is going to be pretty cool. Hopefully you're absolutely invited.
Yes, please.
But essentially, I started off in my journey as a producer and as an artist myself, back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, and was lucky enough to kind of, go through the rigmarole of the industry, sign to labels, both major and indie, sync and licensing, publishing, touring, booking agents, yada, 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 and had some really good experiences, also had some really bad experiences. Was lucky enough to meet, my then manager, my now business partner and wife, Christina, and we were able to, develop the kind of basis of Cartel. And I guess the original kind of thought around what Cartel was going to be was, we noticed a really significant gap in between local and developing artists and guys at the, major level in terms of, they had major development deals, signed to bigger conglomerates, whatever it may be. And the difference was that the local acts, or the developing acts, I should say, they didn't have access to any infrastructure. So when it comes to a local act, they need to, lean into their passion around what, it is, whether it be songwriting, production, whatever it may be. They need to, have the resources to be able to make that music, generate that music. Then they need to become marketing and PR extraordinaires. Then they need to work out how to actually communicate it to an audience, yada, 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 and go through that rigmarole. And what we were finding, and still to this day, is a situation where a lot of good artists stop because they get to the point where they're like, you know what? I don't know if I can swear on this, but
you can.
A lot of artists get to the point where they're like, you know what, fuck this. I just want to, I just want to make music. Like this industry music business stuff is just too hard, So we wanted to create Cartel just to be a resource for artists, particularly at the local and independent level, to be able to, have a resource hub to come and get the answer. Whether that be you should be developing in this way, developing in that way, whatever. The unfortunate thing, because each artist journey and each band journey is different, no journey is the same. And that's why there isn't a specific uni course that you can go to, how to become an artist, because it's not relevant and it's consistently changing. So we just wanted to be at the forefront of that and be able to be a resource to be able to help independent and developing acts develop into whatever form of sustainability that looks like. So in terms of services, we've had a few different looks over the years in terms of being management and now not management, and PR and not being PR and all of that kind of stuff. But essentially what we define ourselves as is an artist development and a label service business. So So on one side we work with, as I said, the local developing acts, and within our services, our whole kind of focus is around upskilling them. So we do things called artist development sessions, which is where we sit down with an artist, very much like we're sitting down now, and put on our management hats for them without technically being their management, and in the nicest way possible, rip apart their project. It's like, what's working, what's not working, where are you really strong, where are you not so strong, where does your passion lie? And the idea of that session is to give them all of the resources that they would need to get from A to B. So that they don't need to be giving someone 15% for no reason, or, outsourcing ridiculous money to PR when they don't need to, or understanding that they might not need a label right now, or whatever it is. And then on the other side, we've been able to carve out quite a good niche in the label service space. The bulk of our work there is working with international acts that are trying to break it within the Australian market. Obviously, what happens in Australia and New Zealand is very different to what happens in the UK or the US. And so we found as we started developing, we found a really good niche in that, bigger labels and bigger artists, generally when they think about Australia, it's just a tick box, because they're making most of their money going from Europe to US, and not really much is happening in Australia. And when they do come to Australia, it's just a report that the label gets saying they got this media, they got that media. And we just kind of thought, we know this territory really well. We know a lot of people here. We understand how this works and how our market operates. So we have something to offer. For example, Peggy Gou is probably one of the bigger acts that we worked with, which was, an amazing experience for us to see kind of what happens at that major level, but to be able to be a really small part of that campaign and help her break within this Australian market so that when she actually comes here to tour, she can sell meaningful tickets and she can develop that base from there. That's really what our focus is. So that's a really long-winded answer. I'm so sorry. I've probably taken up all of our time. But that's essentially what Cartel is.
Well, that's great because I can see, especially from the side of a touring artist, right? You may not know the venues that are there. You may not know the festivals that are there. You certainly wouldn't know the bookers for those associated sort of venues and festivals, right? So I guess if you are there to provide those answers, it stops them from having to reinvent the wheel every time, yeah? I guess that's sort of what sums up what you do, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
Like you have done the homework. You have, performed those services for other people. When people come in, it's not like, like for example, if I come in with a band, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I want to play at the Corner Hotel or something, right? I'd have to find out, okay, well, who's the booker there? How do I apply for it? What do they want out of that? Whereas I guess you guys would have more experience and knowledge of what it's like to try to get those jobs, those gigs around town. Hey,
absolutely. And it even comes, it's even deeper to that in that, a lot of what we're going to go into today is, around going from a hobby to a profession, linking that to how to actually develop an artist project, whether it be small or whether it be major. It's really the same thing. It's how do we develop repeat listenership? Repeat listenership is everything because we can get 1 million streams, but if we can't sell 3 tickets, well, we haven't got an audience.
That's the dilemma of the modern age,
right?
Isn't it?
And that's right. And I have many opinions on this and I can go on about it all day, but the reality is that there are 2 types of artists that we see. Ones that have a whole bunch of media support, radio play, streaming support, yada, yada, yada. The list goes on. They've got a high profile manager and label behind them, etc. And they put on a show and can't sell 3 tickets. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got guys that are selling out 2,000 cap rooms across the country, but they can't break through that barrier, within the digital realm, which is where all our audiences are essentially consuming music these days because they haven't got a process there. And so a lot of what we do in both kind of sectors of what we do, it's really about developing repeat listenership because if we can do that, our streaming affects our ticket sales and our ticket sales affect our streaming. And it also allows artists to understand where their strengths and weaknesses are and where to double down to develop that sustainability. For a songwriter who doesn't really care about touring, well, it doesn't really matter whether they know the booker at the corner, but it does matter that they are really aware of what AMCOS and PPCA do and, what different sync and licensing companies do and understand the process of songwriting with a label and how it affects, the income of an artist and understanding all of those things. And for a touring act, it's completely different, where the priorities are. So essentially at a local level, it's just helping artists understand what their priorities are. At a major level, I shouldn't say a major level, but at a more developed level for an artist, it's more about, okay, let's develop repeat listenership in a certain part of the territory and build off the back of that.
Is the primary goal for a lot of artists income, or is it still brand awareness, or where do you find your clients sit?
Yeah, it does depend, and it depends on the priority of what the artist wants to achieve. I'll use myself as an example. I still make music, but the music I make will never see the light of the day. Partly because it's terrible. No, it's bad. But secondly, because I don't want to be a touring artist. I don't want to necessarily collaborate with other artists on music, and it's not a priority of mine to be a full-time act. Whereas other artists and a lot of the guys on the spectrum, of artists, they want to develop sustainability into a job, financially to be able to create a career. If that's something that artists want to do, well, then it's a situation where, creativity meets commerce. It's like, how do we take something that's creative and how do we put processes around that to, number one, remain passionate about it, but develop a business out of it. And that's something that can be quite challenging for a lot of artists because, adding process or adding structure generally takes it makes it for a lot of artists can make it a little bit icky and a little bit kind of too scientific, and so for us it's really about working with the artists around what type of sustainability do you want to develop into? Because there's different types. There's financial sustainability where we can do this for a job, and that's, if that's what it is, we put process around that. But sustainability might just mean, we make enough to be able to reinvest back into the project, so I can pay to come to a great studio and record, and just fund it back into my art. And so I think it's really important, not from the get-go, but when artists start to develop a little bit more, I think it's really important for them to understand what they actually are trying to achieve. And if they can do that, you can then put the processes behind that. So I think it's less about financial, it's more about understanding what the priorities are or what the goal is of what you're trying to achieve. And then the processes with which you put around that, I think, is really important.
That's a good point, actually. Do you find that you are dealing out some bitter pills to some artists? Like, let's say someone has a goal of financial independence. Let's say they say, okay, yep, I want to make this type of music and I don't want a day job, right? But the type of music that they make is maybe a little niche, maybe a little obscure, and perhaps maybe the craftsmanship is not there yet.
Yeah.
Do you have to politely tell them, all right, these are your strengths, these are your weaknesses? And how do you find their reaction is to that sometimes?
Yeah. I've definitely had to have some hard conversations with artists in the past. And look, I think, again, our conversations with artists are always long-term. So not that we're speaking to them long-term, but it's our conversation with them is about them developing over a long term. Our kind of motto is essentially a slow build is longevity in the market. The slower the build, the longer you're around. And so it's not the process of it's not from, being at B and getting there from A. It's the process of how we get from A to B that we're concerned with, because that's where the processes and the systems come in. I have had to have some pretty tough conversations with some artists around, their music, how it connects. Most of it is more so around managing expectations. I know for myself as an artist, I feel uniquely qualified to speak about this because I was an artist in this position. But, you make a song, you pour your heart and soul into it, you do the car test, you show your friend or your family or whatever it is, it's the best song you've ever made, you're so proud of it. With that comes expectation. For me, it was, I'm going to put this song out because it's good, it's going to hit. And then I'm going to be in Ibiza playing Ushuaia with Calvin Harris, some model champagne, like I'm quitting uni, we're on. And then you put it out there, and realistically it may do some good things for your career in terms of, may get you an opportunity to come on a podcast, it may get you a show here or there, develop listenership in a small base, whatever it may be. But because of what my expectations were as the artist, I see it as a flop. Now, when that happens consistently with acts, generally what you find is that's when the artists want to step back because, they're either bitter or rightfully so, bitter, or they want to take a step back because they just feel like that they don't know what to do. And so our conversations are always, hey, it's not about this one thing that you're working on now that's your whole life. It's how does that thing build into the next thing, and that build into the thing that comes after, and so on and so forth. And, it's not only with artist projects, it's with business as well. It's with what you do with this podcast, it's what we do with Cartel. It's consistently morphing into the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I think every conversation that we have with an artist is always about managing expectation, and they're generally the hardest conversations to have, and they're something that I don't feel necessarily comfortable to have with a lot of artists a lot of the time, particularly when I feel that, I'm more than happy to give technical feedback and give feedback around, turn this kick drum down a little bit or whatever it is. But, the reality is that when that artist puts it out to an audience and tries to communicate it, it's subjective. You
took the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, I can't make you like my music. All I can control is getting it to you. And, you'll decide whether you like it or not. The job of an artist is to be able to do that repeatedly to the same person and then make that person decide whether they want to become a fan or not. And I think that's the difference now. It's we don't necessarily need the middleman of a media, like a Triple J or a Spotify or Spotify playlisting or whatever it is to actually endorse that, because we have the resources to be able to go direct to Ben and, make him discover meaningfully, a project and then the process of being able to morph that into you listening to someone's entire catalog as opposed to just one song. And that should be the focus for artists. Now, I think it's never been a better time to be an artist in that we just have the ability to connect, and we don't need to connect with millions of people. You know, particularly going back to your point around releasing niche music, you know, audiences have never been smarter and never been more attuned to what's happening in terms of what they like. So it's never been, you know, an easier time to be a niche act and actually understand how to connect, you know, and again, develop sustainability off the back of that, you know. So yeah, I'm just waffling on. I'm so sorry.
Don't apologise. Yeah. No, as you were talking about that, I thought, oh yeah, there's almost this myth, and I think maybe it comes from maybe, let's say from the 60s through till the late 90s, right? Where it was almost, making music was almost like a lottery, right? You would pour your heart and soul into this magnum opus, right? This thing that was amazing. And then all of a sudden, someone in the music industry would find it and they would champion it. And all of a sudden, you're on TV, you're doing interviews, and you are plucked from obscurity. I think that reality shows in particular, have encouraged that myth, you know, that this Australian Idol, you know, experience where you go on TV, you do your audition, and then all of a sudden you're, you know, playing at the MCG, right? Whereas that's a fantasy. Like, that's not how it is in real life. And I think when you were saying, that experience, right, where you think, oh yeah, I'm going to make this amazing track that I love, I've poured my heart and soul into it, and that's going to make me world famous, right? I've had that experience too. I spent 6 months, you know, you spend $1,000 mixing and mastering it, right? And then you put it out on Spotify, and what do you get? 100 listeners, right? If you're lucky in the first month. And I think the realization that I had was that, everyone's in this position now. Like, you're not special by doing this, and you've got competition. And so I think where it sounds like Cartel comes in is that you've gone, right, I've had that experience. Now I want to know how to get to the next step, right? How do I get from this, you know, friends and family in the car? You know, I do one Facebook post when I release the song, you know?
Well, I you know, even with that right there, it's like, you know, say you've got a release, you know, generally most artists go through I'm announcing the song, you know, on X date, here's a pre-save, which let's not get into pre-saves because, again, we'll be here all day. And then there's another pillar post, let's call it, it's my song's out now, please go stream it. You know, you may be a little bit different because you consume music the way I do as an industry person, but, you know, I mean, you name one time that you've been scrolling through Instagram or TikTok as a consumer, see a cover art and go, that looks like a really nice cover art, I'm going to go stream this song on Spotify.
Never.
It never happens. So we can't then go, all right, you know, that's going to be our process, because it's not going to work, you know? So I think for me, realistically, what separates the great acts from the mediocre ones, regardless of industry support, regardless of how good their music is, whatever it is, it's the ability for an artist to be able to develop process and to balance in two places. First is the creative, because let's face it, without the music, you have nothing. And that will always be the cornerstone of what you're trying to achieve. And then secondary to that is having processes in place that allow you to communicate that to an audience that's likely to care, in the live scene, in the digital sphere, in, you know, the streaming sphere, everywhere, right? And being able to generate a balance between those two things, that's where growth comes in terms of, you know, whether that be developing a niche audience, whether that developing awareness, developing within the industry, all of it. It always comes back to creative and communication. That's it. You know, and you know, I have conversations with artists, particularly bands, all the time around playing shows. And if you do want to laugh, go onto our TikTok and have a look at our TikTok comments. They're fantastic around this topic. And my whole kind of thing with shows is that, you know, you could play a show at the Corner Hotel or the Workers Club or something like that. Say you've got a single, you do a single launch, you play a show at the Workers Club, you sell it out, 300 tickets, whatever it may be. That's awesome, right? That, though, does nothing for you in Sydney. It does nothing for you in Brisbane. And now that doesn't mean that show is irrelevant, because it's still super relevant for you to develop your chops as a performer, to understand AV, front and back of house, lighting, all of that stuff. You know, the process of rehearsals and building a set, you know, understanding what a tight set means, how to read an audience, all that kind of stuff, which is really important. But in terms of actually the development of an audience, it does nothing. Right? So for me, it always comes back to, if you want to develop into a touring act, it's how are we actually developing demand for our catalog within the digital sphere So that when you go to Sydney, when you go to Brisbane, Bob in Brisbane's going to be like, I want to buy a ticket for this band show because I listen to their entire catalogue and I'm a listener, right? And I'm going to pay $20 for that show, right? But playing that show at the Workers Club doesn't do that, right? So again, it's really about understanding what our priorities are around what we're trying to achieve and then creating the balance between those two things. The creative process, you write, demo, record, produce, mix, master. And within that, artists and acts are always 100% in on that process, as they should be. Obviously, they're artists. It's the main thing. And they're consistently refining and redefining what that looks like, which is going to consistently help them create better music tomorrow than what they're writing today. The great acts are then able to then step out of that and go, okay, what is the process of actually communicating this to an audience that is likely to care, to generate discovery, to then build into whatever priority we're developing into touring, sync and licensing, etc.
Is touring a big priority for the bands that you work with?
Mostly, yeah. Mostly. Again, I keep saying priorities, but it really comes down to the priorities. We'll take Mr. Co as an example. We're working with them right now. I think I can say it, but they're going to go on tour at the end of the year. Which is going to get announced fairly shortly. I'm sure it will be announced by the time. I'm looking at Christina and she's like nodding. She's like, you can say this. I don't want Connor, please don't kill me. They've just played a show at the Night Cat, sold it out, 400 people, awesome. We're now generating a tour for them to do the east coast of Australia. But a main focus with us to be able to work with them is how are we developing demand in each one of those states that we're going to, so that you can actually go and play meaningful shows and you can touch your audience. What are we doing with community radio in Brisbane to make sure that we're touching an audience that is likely to care, so that when you go there and you announce your show and we run ads to hit them, that they're going, oh, Mr. Co's coming to Brisbane. Create urgency. I've got to go see that show. That should be the focus. And I think that's what's missing now. I think, Mr. Co of 2 years ago would go, all right, we'll do a tour and we'll post on Instagram that we're doing the tour and hopefully we'll sell some tickets. It's like, let's go deeper than that. Let's really connect with Bob, who's likely to buy that ticket, and develop it from there. Does that answer your question? Or
Yeah, it does. It does, absolutely. Because I guess, what I was trying to figure out as well, which you did answer, is like, so the touring is definitely, because I think a lot of musicians would have stars in their eyes, right? Like they'd have this dream. It's like, yep, I'm going to be on the cover of Rolling Stone. I want to tour the United States. I want to be a household name, right? Like that's, in their hearts of hearts, they might have contemplated it at least once or twice, right? And I guess, it's impossible, I think, to make the art, right? But then manage all that back end stuff as too, right? Which there's kind of this expectation you have to do it now, because everyone's almost grassroots now. It'd be, even if you were to get signed to like, a Universal or something like that, they want someone who's already famous now, right? So
absolutely,
whichever way you've got to do it, it's not perhaps that mystique of the 70s where people could just be a bedroom artist and then someone would champion them and just present them to the world and say, okay, here you go, get on stage.
It's not linear anymore. Yeah. The process isn't linear. Like, as you said, like 20 years ago, to be able to develop an artist, it was, that artist makes really good music. They distribute it physically to JB Hi-Fi, Sanity, if your listeners remember what those stores are, off the beat record stores, whatever it is. And then if, you sell enough units, you'll tour. And if you tour, you make money. And if you make money, you make a job out of it. And industry comes somewhere in the middle there between, the distribution side and the touring side. Now, because of not only the access to music, but the accessibility to be able to become an artist, like you'll probably laugh, you're probably classically trained or something. Like you're talking to a guy like, I learned all of my musical theory for free on YouTube. I learned how to use all of the DAWs, Logic Pro X, Pro Tools, FL Studio, how to even download, Massive to be able to use my, develop bass lines and stuff like that.
You're of that era, the Massive era.
Oh, yeah, man.
Before Serum, but Massive, yeah.
Before Serum. Diva was also really good.
Oh, that's still big, I thought. Yeah. I haven't used it, but yeah.
Diva's great. Let's not nerd out on that side, though, because it's been a while. But, I learned all of that for free. So we're in a situation now where, every man and his dog is an artist. So, and particularly within AUNZ, Australia, New Zealand, industry, there's only a certain amount of industry here, and when you break that down into genre or subgenre, like within the electronic sphere, it's only really small, you know? And so we've got an inflated number of artists, but a really tiny amount of industry. And so that's where you find that major labels and stuff like that are really hoping for that TikTok hit because their interest isn't developing artists. Their interest is making money. You know, let's call a spade a spade. Like music industry is an industry. They want to make money, right? Whereas an artist, you know, particularly at a local level, they're not doing it for money. They're doing it for love, as they should. You know, the money is the last thing to come, you know? So I think the accessibility to be able to develop, the accessibility of becoming an artist has really changed the format of how artists develop these days because all of the resources are here. It's really around how artists upskill to be able to develop that. And that's why companies like ours are around, to be able to help upskill.
What are some other artists that you've worked with?
Yeah, so across the journey, we've been really lucky to have worked with some developing acts, which are great. Currently, we're working with a few acts. So Peggy Gou would be one of them.
Yeah, yep.
Romy, who we're working on one of their tracks at the moment that was co-produced by Fred again, which is, I mean, incredible.
Romy's from the XX.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. We're also working with Jamie XX, which is great. So that's been awesome on a bit more of a label service front to be able to not work directly with the artist, but work with the labels internationally and the labels that are licensing them within Australia to be able to present them and develop them within this market. Locally, we're working with a whole bunch of different acts. We'd be here forever naming them. Just to name a few, like Blush Go is one that we're really enjoying working with right now at a social strategy kind of communications level. Kian 3% is another one who just put out a song with Jess Malboy, which is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Their album's coming later this year. Shouse, who did Love Tonight. Lude. There's a whole bunch of kind of artists that we're working with, which is just, it's a trip out. Like, during just post-COVID, we were lucky enough to work on some great tours as well. So we were able to do comms for the Festival X tour, which had like Calvin Harris, Megan Thee Stallion.
Oh, that one, yeah.
Yeah, which was pretty insane, and some different tours that have been happening around. Christina does most of that work. It's me just kind of wigging out going, oh my God, that's Calvin Harris, holy shit. But yeah, it's been incredible. Like I get up every morning and, you know, I love what I do. And you know, that's all I can really ask for.
That is an enviable position.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap it up there, Anth. If people want to find you on the intertubes, where do they find you?
Yes. So our Instagram is cartel.australia. LinkedIn, you can find me at anthony.agostino. Cartel Australia on TikTok, cartelmanagementoz.com.au for our website. For any independent artists looking, we've got a tab on that website, our article tab. It's just a free resource for all artists. Hopefully we can link it in the show notes or whatever, but it's just a free resource for artists that want to understand more about playlisting, want to understand more about radio play, developing repeat listenership as we were speaking about, all that kind of stuff. There's about 60 to 70 articles on there that break down a lot of those processes. So if any artists kind of want them, feel free to go grab them. Facebook, Cartel Australia. I think that's everything. But feel free to hit me up whenever. I'm always around to talk.
Fantastic. It's been a real pleasure, mate.
No, awesome, mate. Love your work, and hopefully we see each other a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one.
You too.